Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Faces of History. Today, we look at the man known as the father of modern warfare, the Golden King, the first modern general, the Lion of the North, Rex Gutorum, Gustavus Adolphus. Born in 1594, Gustav II Adolf of House Vasa, don't confuse him with Gustav Vasa of Sweden, different guy, much less nice, was groomed by his father Charles IX of Sweden from a very young age to be a good soldier and a good ruler and, above all, a good Protestant. Gustavus, and before you say anything, I'm going to use his Latinized name because it's a lot easier to say, and I'm going to use his first name because he was chill. Gustavus was very bright and very motivated in all actuality. He never had much of a childhood. He was very linguistically inclined, however, speaking not only his native Swedish, but also German and Latin and Dutch and Spanish and Russian and Polish and Anyway, Gustavus was deeply committed to Protestantism. During wartime, he prohibited his soldiers from any form of sacking or pillaging. Moreover, his stated casus belli for joining the 30 Years' War was to save the Protestants of Germany, who admittedly were kind of getting their butts kicked around the continent at that point, so that's valid. In battle, he personally led his armies, wearing only leather armor, saying, "The Lord God is my armor." This worked great for him until he died. In October of 1611, Gustavus rose to the Swedish throne at the ripe age of 16. Shout out to any high school sophomores in the audience, right? Normally someone that young shouldn't have been the king in Sweden, but it's Gus. Who's going to say no to him? Upon his ascension, he inherited several conflicts from his father, Charles IX, notably the rivalry with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, whose king, Sigismund, was really trying to get Sweden for his own. Gustavus had to deal with the Kalmar War with Denmark, from whom Sweden had only recently won independence. Kalmar Union sound familiar to anyone? He was not really interested in the war with Denmark at that point, and so after some minor engagements, he managed to sign a peace treaty in 1613. He had to give up some concessions, but the most important part was that he gained free access through the Danish straits of Kattegat and Skagerrak, I know that was wrong, for all Swedish ships, and also ended any designs by the Danish upon the Swedish throne, finally. Gustavus was also obligated to continue the Ingrian War against Russia. Now, essentially what happened here, Russia was in the midst of its time of troubles. They were besieged by famine and false kings and Poles, so they called in their friend Sweden to help. And the Swedish were like, "Yeah, but also can we have your country?" So, Swedish forces under Jacob de la Gardie moved in, actually helping the Romanov dynasty to seize power in Russia and assuring peace across all the land, but then they made their own claim on the throne. Fighting between the two powers lasted for years until finally a peace treaty was signed in 1617, with Gustavus seizing all Russian lands adjacent to the Baltic. Sweden held these for over a century, I think, almost a century, until some great dude took them back. In the early 1700s, who would that have been? Gary the Great? Susie the Great! Anyway, at this point, the two powers, Russia and Sweden, became de facto allies against Poland and Lithuania. And Gustavus had not forgotten his qualms with Poland. Oh no. Taking advantage of Poland being distracted by wars with Russia and the Ottoman Empire, he invaded Livonia 4 times in the period of 1618 to 1629. Each time he made more and more progress until finally he seized all of Livonia for himself in 1629 and absorbed the Commonwealth Baltic Fleet as well, ending any Polish dreams of a Scandinavian invasion, which, yeah, was a thing. These campaigns served conveniently as a testing ground for Adolphus and his troops as well, his armies early on being primarily made of mercenaries and operating with very outdated tactics. This was to change. 30 Years' War had begun in 1618 and been ravaging Germany for 12 years. But in 1630, Adolphus decided that it was unacceptable. His stated war goals of religious altruism were not unfounded, as the last belligerent Protestant kingdom, Denmark, had just been defeated by the Holy Roman Empire. At this point, Protestant populations in Europe faced ruinous taxes and even potential genocide. However, Gustavus was also almost certainly getting involved in the war to expand his Baltic Empire. Whatever his reasons, in 1630, Adolphus invaded the continent with 5,000 troops, and the Imperials said, "That's cute," and they kept right on pillaging. Adolphus immediately began work, bringing the defeated Protestant princes under his banner. He was actually, admittedly, he was first met with some resistance by these very same Protestant princes he was supposed to be rescuing. But over time, and by using the horrific imperial sack of Magdeburg to his political advantage as a propaganda tool, he mustered an army of 40,000 troops, Swedes and some Germans. John George I of Saxony threw in with Gustavus in 1631, this being the final straw for the Catholic League. Johann Sir Clay, the Count of Tilly, and a very hotshot imperial general, finally invaded the electorate of Saxony that summer. What followed was Adolphus's greatest victory, the First Battle of Brighton Fields. Fighting occurred in Saxony, in the general Leipzig region, which I mean, it's all of Saxony. I mean, come on, like Saxony is like this big, like really, like it's all there. Anyway, coming into the battle, the Swedish had more cavalry and better artillery, whereas the imperial army under Tilly had more professional infantry. Adolphus placed the Saxons on his left while concentrating cavalry on the right and distributing his artillery all throughout. The Imperials formed their classic square tercio formations, which were effective against cavalry, but they're not nearly as mobile or versatile as the Swedish linear formation. Anyway, the battle began with the Imperial cavalry strike on the Swedish right, which was repulsed, but Tilly simultaneously ordered a general assault on Gustavus's left flank, driving the Saxons completely from the field. Tilly's army then began to advance diagonally into this void, attempting to turn the Swedish flank. However, Adolphus at that time launched a daring cavalry strike on the Imperial left, capturing the artillery here, turning them on Tilly's own troops. The Swedish army then executed a beautiful rotation, turning their entire army to face the Imperial army, which was still marching north and was thus completely outmaneuvered. At this point, it was a total rout, and Tilly lost over half of his army. This victory was an immense one for the Protestants, arguably turning the tide of the entire war. Brandenburg, Hessen, Hanover, and Saxony all joined the alliance, while France increased funding and very soon began to immobilize an army of their own to fight the Holy Roman Empire. Adolphus was very powerful at this point, going wherever the heck he wanted in Germany, basically, for a while, wintering in the Rhineland and then invading Catholic Bavaria in 1632. Unfortunately, the Imperials were not bested yet. Imperial General Wallenstein scored a victory over Adolphus at Alte Veste, and then threatened Saxony yet again, forcing Gustavus to move to Saxony again to stop him. A battle ensued near Leipzig. Yeah, no comment. This battle that ensued was the Battle of Lutzen. The Swedes assaulted the imperial positions, Adolphus himself rushing recklessly into the seemingly perennially weak imperial left. But this was one reckless charge too many for the Lion of the North, because he was shot down during this assault. Death didn't stop him from winning the battle, of course, as the imperial reinforcements under Pappenheim were driven off the field by vengeful Swedes. The death of Gustavus Adolphus was a huge break for the Catholic League, giving them such time to regroup, but it already saved the Protestant cause. 3 years ago, Bohemia, Denmark, and the rest of the princes had been defeated, and there was that actual fear of a Protestant genocide across Germany. Instead, he had shattered any myth that had existed of Austrian invincibility, and moreover brought France into the 30 Years' War against Austria, who would never again regain full control over the empire. Now, let's talk about what Gustavus did for the world. Unsurprisingly, Gustavus Adolphus is most known for his military reforms, which were revolutionary. One of the most major features of his was his extensive cross training, which meant that every man in his army could fire a musket, and ride a horse, and operate a cannon, and wield a pike if necessary, regardless of their specialization. This is a crucial skill in the heat of battle. Along with this, he made great use of combined arms, such as infantry fire, covering retreating cavalry, that sort of thing. This was made possible because he valued all branches equally, a concept unheard of in his elitist neighbors, which favored cavalry over all else. Swedish infantry of this age were not yet professional, but were very well drilled, and could generally fire at a rate far faster than their German counterparts. This was partially due to the preloaded paper cartridges he used. Like, you know how fair it is? Unfair it is. If everyone on the battlefield is got their gun and they're stuffing like powder down there and balls and just stuffing things down there, and then the Swedes are just like, no wonder they won. His army, armed with light caliber muskets, were highly mobile and highly versatile, giving them greater ability to adapt on the battlefield. In line with this doctrine, instead of using bulky square or block formations, Gustavus formed his infantry into lines, shallow ones at that, maybe 6 men deep. Rather than attempting to fire while moving, they would wait for an enemy to get close, then open fire in one great salvo and launch a bayonet charge, generally having a great shock value and carrying all before them. Adolphian artillery was highly mobile, and he actually experimented with leather cannons. Not a great idea, but the idea was there. He distributed these light cannons to support each regiment on the field of battle. Although the use of cavalry as a shock force was not really new and you could be traced back for millennia, but it had fallen out of use in the last 2 centuries. But Gustavus Adolphus didn't care. He still used it, and his aggressive cavalry charges were vastly successful. He modernized the structure of Swedish armies, like using the actual regiments and brigades that we still use today, and improving logistics as well. He standardized the calibers of his guns, he phased out pikes as the primary infantry weapon to be replaced by flintlock muskets, and was actually the first modern nation to field a standing army. And it wasn't just military reforms that he instituted, but administrative as well. Along with his chancellor, Axel Oxenstierna, he reorganized the government. Sweden had long had a five-man council made up of the chancellor, the head of government, as well as the general and the admiral and like the janitor and a fishing dude, I don't know. They didn't really have any power, but in the 1620s their powers were vastly expanded. Each was now the head of an entire department. And this cabinet actually ruled Sweden while Gustavus was gallivanting around Europe and eating flan and dying and stuff. This council is still in place in Sweden today. Counties and administrative districts were instituted in Sweden, and both educational and economic reforms were instituted. Sweden had never really been feudalistic or particularly backwards, but now they were just way up here. During his rule, Gustavus transformed Sweden, a country of not even 1 million inhabitants at that time, into a major power in Europe. Under his rule, the Swedish Empire, which, yeah, that was a thing, reached nearly its greatest extent, becoming more of a Baltic superpower than even the Hanseatic League had ever been. Perhaps most important of all, he forged the path for victory over the Catholic League in the 30 Years' War. From this victory stemmed not only the balance of power in Europe and the world for centuries, but also such concepts as the separation of church and state, as well as the continued survival of Protestantism in Netherlands and Germany, nations which would never have so fully embraced the Industrial Revolution without the institution of Protestantism. Like so many, Gustavus Adolphus is famous for his place in history as much as his own feats. Like, maybe if Sarah Palin had been Queen of Sweden during the 30 Years' War, she would have done even better. Maybe, but good old Gus still changed the course of history forever. Next week Faces of History is, well, I'm not going to tell you, but I will say that they really hate beans. Comment any guesses below, as well as any suggestions for future videos. As always, click my face to subscribe for weekly Faces of History. Remember, you too are the face of history. Your face is beautiful. Thanks for watching.